Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss another reveal for the consequences of our first year of Brexit, as it appears that UK cross-border retail was slashed by 71%. Not all down to Brexit, of course, because the pandemic has taken its toll, but when you look at some of the details, you can see how Brexit is going to prevent it recovering. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So this research is via Adyen, which is a payments platform. As such, they've got ready access to a lot of detail on how much retail is going on and where. The headline figure is that there has been a drop of UK cross-border retail of 71% since July 2020. So that means in Britain, we're buying 71% less stuff from countries around us. Now let's think about that, because like I say, this is bound to be a combination of both the pandemic and Brexit, and it can sometimes be tricky to separate the two. But July 2020 represented like the dip in trade caused by the pandemic. You know, we were still in the customs union single market at the time, but COVID had shut down a lot of production. So in that early period, what happened was, even though the first wave was not as serious as, say, the second wave or the third wave, because a lot of businesses had to shut down to put things in place to be able to work with the virus, to be able to separate out people, keep people safe, a lot of production got shut down. That didn't get shut down even during the worst second wave. So because that first period of the pandemic hit our production hardest, just as it did throughout Europe, July 2020 actually represented a low point of sorts. Certainly other countries started to make their recoveries after the summer of 2020. So if cross-border trade was down 71% compared to a time when Europe was just coming out of being shut down, therefore suffering the most during the entire pandemic, that's a big indicator that Brexit is writ large here. But that's just empirical thinking. There were some interesting stats in their survey. For example, 37% of shoppers that they surveyed said that they would only buy from someone abroad if the delivery charge is reasonable. Now, that's going to be the case for a lot of people. As a direct result of Brexit, the price you pay above the price of the product itself can be a bit beefy. Due to the lack of lorry drivers, as well as the paperwork that needs filling in, that costs someone time, and the potential delays at the border, the cost of delivery has increased massively. In fact, for some things, it actually isn't worth it for companies to even supply Britain if it's a small order. But it isn't just about the cost of delivery. There's VAT even on low value items now, increasing the cost. With import controls coming online the last couple of weeks, there's a higher chance of import tariffs being due as well, because last year there was a very light touch applied to them. Companies could essentially self-certify that their goods met origin rules by basically just ticking a box. This year it's still fairly light. Like, you still self-certify, but you're supposed to have documentary proof that your goods meet the rules for tariff-free trade. You don't have to lodge the paperwork anywhere, it seems, as such, but if HMRC ask for it, you'd have to be able to provide it. So that adds to the costs as well, because even if the goods are eligible for tariff-free trade, it costs to get the documentation together to prove it. Should it be required? 30% of shoppers in the survey said that they had avoided getting items from abroad for fear of being hit by additional charges. That's an important point as well. 30% of shoppers will just avoid buying online from another country, not because of extra charges that they will decide is too much, but just out of fear that they may be hit by charges which they're not aware of. And indeed, any import duties need not be anything to do with the seller. That's for the recipient to deal with. They're applied as they are imported. So nothing necessarily to do with where they're exported from. So you can be hit with extra charges that may not be clear when you're buying a product from abroad. Now, the aim of the report, which I'll link an article on it in the description below, was to highlight how businesses could entice shoppers by, for example, listing products in the relevant currency, accepting full range of common payments and so on, because those are also issues for buyers. But obviously my interest is in the factors that are part of government policy, not some businesses' policy. And just because this trade under discussion is UK buying from surrounding countries doesn't mean it's not a concern for those who support Brexit. Because you may think a Brexit supporter will go, well, this is fine. What's your problem? This is lost EU trade, isn't it? This is Britain not buying from the EU. I'm fine with that. But that is not considering the two major problems for people in Britain. First, shoppers in the EU will have the same attitude. They don't want to buy from British suppliers if the delivery costs are too high or if there might be hidden import charges. Second, for British consumers, this means less choice. If a significant people are just going to restrict themselves to only buying from Britain due to the fear of hidden costs and high delivery charges, then there will be a lot of products they simply cannot get. Just can't get them. British producers cannot match the range of goods produced across almost an entire continent. And given that one source of angst for over a third of shoppers was delivery and import charges, the situation is only going to get worse. We've just applied customs controls of EU imports into Britain. This has massively increased delays for freight. Those delays will translate into high costs, less availability. And if you're pinning your hopes on the government working hard to improve the situation before summer, I am told that officials are not taking the problem seriously at all. In fact, there seems to be a flat denial of the problems. Now, as I keep saying, the first step to solving a problem is recognising the problem. Pretending that the problem is due to something less comfortable, or less uncomfortable, I should say rather, or even denying the problem altogether means that the problem will just persist. If you don't own up to what the problem is and what is causing it, you cannot solve it. The government have formed on this as well from last year, when they were warned about the shortage of key workers, including lorry drivers. The government did nothing. Not a thing. I suppose they thought market forces will deal with it. Their famous market forces. It didn't, of course. The government were forced to act, but it was too little, too late. The same looks set to apply here as well. There will doubtless be some fudge that reverses a bit of their Brexit again to stave off complete calamity. I certainly don't see how they can carry out their intended standards checks in place this summer when we don't even have the vets for it, let alone anything else in place. And then there's this. A report that the Operation Brock system, which is like puts in place a contraflow for when it gets a bit busy in Kent to deal with major tailbacks for, what they call the early teething problem stages of Brexit, needs some permanent construction now on the M20, which links Dover with Folkestone where the Channel Tunnel is. Basically a very important road for freight. And it's going to need shutting down at night in order to carry out £35 million worth of changes to accommodate what the government now seem to accept are permanent traffic problems caused by Brexit. And the works are expected to last a year. So we have this road, which is already under pressure due to the trade barrier delays that the government kept ignoring. And in the year when we're putting even more pressure on it, we're going to have roadworks going on that will last a year. It also annoyed, apparently, the local council, who said that they haven't actually been told by the government why it even needs to happen. I strongly suspect that's because the answer to their question is Brexit. But Brexit must not be mentioned in relation to anything negative like, gridlock on your motorways. And this is what we can get used to, I feel. A government that does not want to hear about the problems of Brexit because they promised that there wouldn't be any. So when reality becomes unavoidable, they will then have to put in place remedies that will be harder to do and more costly to do than if they'd applied them in plenty of time before the problem hit. They will also be less effective because they will do what they think is the bare minimum to mitigate political but not economic damage, because they will be harder to do and more costly to do, and they'll want to reduce the amount of disruption and the cost. So they will do what they think is the bare minimum, but what the bare minimum is will not actually be the bare minimum. And this will continue until we have a government that isn't implicated in this mess. Because even a more intellectually robust replacement for Johnson, which may or may not happen, will still be trapped by his legacy. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.